First try. Is it the 29th of September? Is that real?
Yeah. Somehow.
Yeah. I don't know what day it is. I don't know what time it is. We're too far in the semester to worry about those things. I have a much higher fondness for thinking of the weeks numerically, so this is just week 6 to me.
Yeah.
The exciting thing about week 6 is we tend to have 15-and-a-half-week semesters. I didn't actually count them today. I suspect you're halfway through the semester, something like that, or like within a few days. It'll be on Friday, probably. Yeah. So, depending on how you cut it, this is probably the middle week, this or next. Also, in fall semester, the second half of the semester tends to be easier because you get the big break for Thanksgiving. So, that should help. In terms of content, tonight at midnight you'll be done with Wordle, and then that means you know how to do projects, and that's like the only thing we have left. So if you've done the project successfully, you've done the project successfully. If not, you have more tries. The remaining tries are called Breakout, Image Shop, Enigma, and Adventure. Adventure's changed a little bit this year, so I don't know that much about that one. Image Shop and Breakout are pretty comfortable. I enjoyed Breakout the most of those. It is a game, and games are cringe, right? Can I get some booing for video games? Yeah, there you go, right? Yeah, but Breakout's good. And Breakout is cool because there's time in it. So I did real-time systems in graduate school because when I finished undergrad, I worked on airplanes and rockets, and those things exist in real life, so it matters what time it is. So Breakout's kind of cool for that reason. Due tonight at 11:59 p.m., Project 1 Wordle. My late policy is no. Now, that means you're going to get it done on time, which will be no problem for you. Apparently the section leaders sometimes accept late work, so you can negotiate with them if you want to. Do not ask me for an extension, I will not give you one. But if you bully your section leader into giving you one, just don't tell me. I don't want to know that, right? And I think the section leaders are much more... they're younger and more optimistic, right? So they're more likely to give you... Like they've been in your shoes more recently. Like, when I was your age, right, I just took CS1, and if my homework wasn't done on time, I just turned in something bad and got a low grade, right? Yeah. That built character. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Okay, midterm on Friday. Don't worry about it until Wordle's in. We'll talk about it on Wednesday. You'll talk about it in your sections. I'm going to show you a few things because I, at various points in my life, have felt anxiety about midterms, and I don't want you to feel anxious. Okay, so, first thing. This is a practice midterm from 23. Okay, I don't really know how PDFs work, so that's fine. Let's do one better than that. I'm going to go to the Discord. Can I open this in front of you? Am I gonna dox someone? Just a sec. Wait, no, I'm still streaming. This doesn't help at all. I should publish my stream key. Unplugging that completely bricked my computer, so. Wait, we're not the Student Association, we're CS1. Okay, so I'm pretty sure this is the practice midterm. I'm distributing it as a GitHub Classroom link. Why am I doing that? On Friday, when you come here to take the midterm, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write 6, that might be 7, is that 8? I'm going to write 8 characters on the board, and you're going to type them into your computer and then start the midterm from a GitHub Classroom link. I'll also have a QR code if that helps you. You're going to see something that looks a lot like this. This one's called Practice 1. This one's not for a grade. I'm just distributing it through GitHub Classroom, same as everything else. So you can do this or not. It's up to you. And accept the assignment, and I sure hope this works. It's going to be really embarrassing if this doesn't work. It worked for you? Okay. I'm going to open the midterm. And there's one difference between this and the actual midterm, which is I gave you the solutions for this one. In theory, I will not accidentally give you the solutions for the real midterm. If I do, absolutely no one say anything. Okay, right? That would be so much work for me to make a third midterm. Okay, And I know right now, because I can see the GitHub Classroom link, I definitely put the solutions in there by accident at least once and had to delete them, right? So at high probability, I'm accidentally going to give you the answer key, right? Okay, so don't plan on me doing that. It'll just be very embarrassing if and when it happens. Okay, so blah, 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 homework. No, this is midterm, right? Okay. That's not how we do. Wait, how do I download zip? Is that right? I don't know what I'm doing. This looks right. Oh yeah, you're not allowed to see like any of the things I have on my computer. Extract. Can I just like open this one? Oh, there it is. 60 minutes individual open note. Okay. That makes sense to me, right? Does that make sense to you? Okay. Maybe this is like too zoomed in or too zoomed out or something. I tried to make it look like the problem sets and the projects. Okay. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then you do your work in here, which is, I opened it in idle by accident. That's really cringe. VS Code is in here somewhere. There it is. Ta-da! Yeah, I gave you some so you don't have to use any of these, right? These are functions I used. And then this is how I did it. And so I think if I run this right now, like nothing happens. Blah, blah. Nothing happens. And your job is to do the things that are in the instructions, but separately, I think I gave you a solution. Oh my gosh. I'm being sent to the shadow realm. Okay. And this is the famous, yeah, you can say whatever you want. I specify in the instructions you do not have to say Uberslay. I think I say positive affirmation of your choice, right? It's a little bit cringe that says Uberslay. I didn't realize that was going to pop up in front of class, right? Okay, but that's what I wanted to see when I was working on this, right? And so this is going to give you some examples. This is based on a Latin magic square, and I think I couldn't find an English one. I was working with one that was like trams. And so when I press, okay, that's not a word. Okay, so let's switch to English. So the deal with a magic square, and I don't want to tell you too much about this because I'm not going to tell you too much about the actual midterm, right? But basically there's like rules over the rows and columns. So if I put in smart here, I think, right? That's fine because that's a word that is reversible. So trams is also a word. And then going down, I have to start this row with the second letter in this row. So it has to also say smart going down and trams going down. So I think you can do meter. And so you can have smart, meter. We don't know what the middle word is yet. Apparently ritum is a word, and it's a type of juniper bush in Southwest Asia. It's in the King James Bible and therefore part of English. Shout out James, one of the worst to ever do it, right? And then we got trams over here, right? So that's how that works. And then you're like, oh, no problem. I will put in a word that starts with AT and ends with AT, and you can't. There aren't any in English. So you're going to lose this game, right? Anyways, play around with that at your own. On Wednesday, when you come to class on Wednesday, decide whether you want me to live code Wordle or this practice exam in front of you. But I also have slides ready if we want to do that. Okay. That's the midterm. It's not relevant right now, but it becomes relevant at midnight, so that's why we covered it now. Okay. The next 2 days should be helpful, particularly on questions 2 to 4. That's true. Okay, there's practice exam on GitHub Classroom. Cool. Today we're going to review functions. Did it explode?
Yeah.
I looked back and I saw chaos, but I don't actually know what happened.
It's not October yet. You haven't done the board movie stuff yet.
I hear that.
Back to normal as soon as you know. It's crazy.
I worry that there's already a skeleton inside of me, even though it's not October yet. Yeah. Does anyone want to ask me anything about Wordle? You made like a yes noise, but then didn't ask anything.
I think I just need to go to the tutoring tonight.
Yeah, probably the tutors can do Wordle. I would say there's the 5 projects: Wordle, Breakout, Image Shop. And then those are like, I call those like the scripting projects, because you write a couple functions. And the last 2 projects are Enigma and Adventure Game. And my impression was the quad tutors last year could not do those projects, which means that if your algorithm for getting the projects done on time involves asking the quad tutors for help, you have a short runway to get off of that methodology, right? I don't think this happened the first year I taught this class. The first year I taught this class, it seemed like everyone felt all of the projects were the same difficulty. This is definitely a post-AI thing, where I think right around 4 or 5, AI gets owned, right? So just look out for that. That said, you should go to quad until you feel comfortable. My sense was some students got very reliant on quad last year and then had a bad time. So use quad, don't rely on quad. Okay. I want to talk to you about functions. One of the reasons I want to talk to you about functions is it's good to think about control flow. I want you to be able to think about what your code is doing the way the computer is thinking about it, so that you're sort of minimizing your duplicate work, right? In order to do that, I'm actually going to think very intentionally today a little bit of just introducing vocabulary. Why am I introducing vocabulary? I think it's hard for you to think about what the computer is doing without having words to describe what it's doing. Maybe not all of you think in spoken language or something like that, but if you do, probably from time to time you're reaching for words or metaphors that aren't quite there for you. I'm just going to provide some that work well enough. They're not necessarily correct, but they are useful. And so I have these 4 things here, and this is meant to support the understanding of what does a return statement do. Return statements should be useful to you on some of the assignments and on some of the midterms and on some of the projects, right? So what do I think of a function? Now, the reason I'm looping back to functions now is because when we were in Carroll, we weren't really writing the classical computer science understanding of function. We were calling them functions. But what those were more properly is something called a procedure, which was a sequence of instructions. A function is a little bit different because a function makes no claims about what instructions occur and only makes a claim about what value is returned. So when we begin thinking about functions, we care a lot more about the return statement. Let me give you an example. Wait, is VS Code not working? No, that's not VS Code, that's OBS Studio. It just ended with S after the first. There was an S before the space, so I assumed it was talking about VS Code, right? Please be working. Be embarrassing if this stream isn't working. Hey, excellent connection. Aw, Google's telling me I'm doing a good job. Aw. Notice none of you ever tell me I'm doing a good job. Okay, so we opened VS Code, and what do I see? Here's the solutions, but here's also each of these is a function because each of them has a return statement in it. Now, some of them are returning nothing, and I could just as easily write return none as nothing after return. But they're not necessarily doing a sequence of actions. Now, they could do a sequence of actions, right? And let's look at an example from the solutions, right? So here are 2 different examples. Row word takes a parameter n. That parameter is the number of the row. Many of you probably wrote this for Wordle, maybe. Maybe you didn't. Okay. And what it does is, given a row, or the number of a row, it will return a word. Now, it does not matter how you write the insides of this function so long as that word is returned. And there are other ways to write the insides of this function. I I have a separate answer key that uses stuff that I haven't taught you yet that does this a different way, and then I changed it to give you the solutions, right? This is much closer to a procedure. There's no visible return statement, though I could just as property like return none here, and everything would keep working. What is going on here? Given some row n and a word, which I call word, I'm going to loop over the word and the columns of the row and place the letters. This is a procedure because I'm doing 5 things and then I'm done. So this we think of more properly as a function because it matters what it gives back to us. And this we think of as taking some action. We can look at how these are used. In interaction, one of the first things I do is I get the current word. I'm going to be checking the word to see if it fits inside of Wordle. When am I going to be using word row? Not that often. On Wordle, I believe you never use this. On this example, and we will switch back to Latin so I can show you what's happening here. Sator arepo. Okay, so tenant is the last word here. Arepo is yellow for a reason. Your responsibility is to figure that out by doing the problem test. Okay. When I press this, something is going to happen. And what's going to happen is all of the remaining letters in this palindrome are determined because I am inputting a 25-letter palindrome. What this means is that as if this word is accepted, the next word must be opera because it must be this word backwards. And then the last word must be rotas, which is like rotate. I don't know. Does anyone know Latin? You all know Latin now because I've taught you, right? So when you go home after winter break, be like, yes, I had a classical education in Latin, right? That's what you should say. Okay. And especially say that if someone will pay you more if you say it. Okay, so I'm going to press enter, and 2 words are going to pop up here. And those are these 2 words, right? This is the reverse of the row 1 word, and this is the reverse of the row 2 word. Oh, gosh. Okay. Don't ever do anything. Okay. Press enter, and these words pop up. So there's not any return values that I'm capturing here. I'm not saying like x equals row word, right? I'm taking a series of actions, and these actions are identical to show message, right? So Uber sleigh pops up at the same time. That is functions versus procedures. But we can think of them all as functions. So what words am I going to use? Invoke, run, and call are the things that I think of I do to a function. So given a function, which is a named code block, I can invoke, call, or run all of the instructions in that named code block by name. I call it by name. I think, is there like a movie called Call by Name? Call Me by Your Name? That doesn't make sense to me. Do I not understand grammar, or do I not understand art?
You don't understand art.
That's better. I'd rather understand grammar than art. Okay, call me by your name? But it's your name. It'd be call me by my name, would it not? How would you know someone's calling you if it's someone else's name?
Well, it's kind of like most pronunciation in different languages are similar, so just call me by your name.
Oh, okay. So it makes perfect sense, actually?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, don't I have egg on my face now? All right. Never listen to me ever again. Thank you. All right. Okay, so call the function by its name in Python. We'll restrict to language, right? And when you do that, when you call it, you use the parens at the end. Like that. Okay, so you've got your parens at the end, and that's how you denote that instead of referring or describing or stating the name of a function, we are invoking, calling, or running, right? I think this is the difference between saying someone's phone number and dialing someone's phone number, for example, so that's kind of where call comes from. When we call a function, we often pass information to that function. Usually we do this with either arguments or parameters. I've historically called them inputs. You're not supposed to do that. This has one argument or parameter, n, because I am asking for the word from a row, but I have to specify which row. Word row, which to me this makes perfect sense, that it's like, hey, given a row, I want the word, or given a word, put it in the row. Maybe that doesn't make sense to you. I don't know. Word, I don't know. You could call it word from row or something. If I need to place some word in a specific row, I need two parameters. I need to both know the number of the row and what word I want to place there. So I have two parameters, or two arguments. When a function completes its block of code, it returns to its caller. It always does this. There is always a return, either implicit or otherwise. Now, where are some places we might want to put a return? Well, in the case of my sort of smaller helper functions, I place the returns at the end, and I omit them if they're just going to be a return none, because Python will automatically return nothing. So I just leave it out, but it is equally proper to write return or return none. Those are allowed. There is the more exciting case, which we see here in enter action, and we look in particular at this line here or this line here. What is going on there? Well, someone's playing Magic. Oh no, I shouldn't have called this Magic because you can play Magic. Does anyone here play Magic the Gathering? That was a trick question. No, you don't. Okay? All right. I got you. You've all been bamboozled. Okay. Wait, you're young people. How do you afford to play Magic? Okay, that's the trick. Okay. Crime. Okay. Yeah. So let's just step through here. Okay, I do some nonsense. I check the current row number, and then what's the first thing I do? I check to see if my word is eligible. So I gave the example of trams and smart. Trams and smart are possible words in a palindrome magic square. Why? Because they are in the list of 5-letter words, whether you go forward or whether you go backwards. So another example is lived in devil. Radar is in both ways. You know what these things are. Okay. If my word is not eligible to be in a magic square, what am I going to do? I'm going to color the row missing color. I'm going to give myself a message. And then I'm going to return. Why am I going to return? Well, because I don't want to do anything else inside of enter action. I am done with my actions, and so I could very carefully think about what's happening next. Instead of this return, I could say else. I only do this if it's not the case that those things are true, and then I just make sure that there's no other code going on here. And maybe that works, or maybe that's way harder to think about, and I don't want to think about that. As soon as I take all of the actions that I want to take, I'm going to return. I think this is an easier way to understand the world. You do not have to agree, but this is the technique I use. So I prolifically use return when I'm dealing with things like gameplay in Wordle or Magic Square. Because oftentimes when you do something in Wordle, you're going to color, and then you're going to not do anything else. And that's the case when the word is wrong, right? You're much more likely to have words wrong in this example, so there are more return statements popping up. Okay. Now, those return statements that I showed you, they were not returning any result. Enter action is just the series of actions that are taken when we press enter. And we can see this because we're never really looking at what the return value of enter action is. We are never, for example, writing a line of code like this one or like that one, where we call a function and we set a variable to be equal to the return value of the function. So, sometimes we care about returning a value, sometimes we do not. In the case of actions, we very rarely care about them, and in the case of helper functions, we semi-regularly care about them. When I took CS1, I learned CS1 in a functional programming language where everything had a return value. That was easier for me. And so I'm trying to talk to you about return values now because it was easier for me. Last two things to look out for. A function cannot be used before they are defined. I think this is true. We'll find out. What have I done? Okay. So all of these functions seem to be being used amicably. If I cut them and move them to Narnia, and then I try to do something, this still works? Okay, I told lies. So it does not matter what order you put the functions in. This line is false. I think it is true in the case of Carol. Does that sound right? So this is situationally true, and this is true in other programming languages. If you hear a function that is not... Oh, I mean before they're defined as in before they're typed. Okay, no, let's give a different example. Surely this won't work. Okay, sator. Oh, row word is not defined, so you have to write the function first. But if I grab the partial definitions, let's see. Trash, okay. Sator. This is like kind of allowed, right? The functions are defined, so I don't get any case where I'm saying, hey, I don't know what that function is, I don't know what to do. It's just nothing's happening. So there are many actions that are missing. And this is the difference between having things defined that are not done and referring to functions that aren't yet written. Okay? You will get different kinds of errors from these. One kind of error is Python popping up an error. The other type of error is your code not doing what you expect, right? So those are distinct. Can I get this all back? That looks fine. Okay. I'm testing this again in case I need to do another example sator. Okay, fine. Does anyone know what a sator is? It's a film. It's a supernatural horror film. It's in the Bible. It's also in the Bible. None of this is helping me. Sator Latin? No, not AI. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, have you heard the story that all words are made up?
Yeah.
Just some of them are more made up than others. Okay. Let's look at some messy or dangerous returns. If code works, it works. I will always maintain that is true. So, especially in 100 level classes, it is common for students to write a 30-line solution to a 1-line problem. And if the code works, it works. No one cares that it's 30 lines. That's fine, right? I think this solution is something like 82 lines. The one that I'm not showing you is like 40 lines, but I haven't taught you enough for that to make sense yet. So just write the lines of code that you need. We should look out for some things here. And one of the things we should look out for is a code pattern that looks like this. This is the if true, return true, else return false pattern. Let's take a look at this. Example.py probably. I is not defined. Wait, I is not defined? Okay. We'll just indent this a little more. Okay, so there I have some code. Okay. So I would say this is technically correct, which is the best kind of correct, right? And then the next best kind of correct is actually correct. And for this to be actually correct, we would remove some code that can contain mistakes. Let me give you an example of a way this can have a mistake and it be non-obvious what it's doing. So if you could tell by looking at that before I ran it that it contained an error, you are smarter than me. I had no idea whether true or false was supposed to be first in that if statement. I don't have any conception of that. I would have to think through an example and be like, okay, 14 when divided by 7 has a remainder of 0, so that means that remainder is equal to 0. So that means, I forget what I was working on. Oh, right, I was checking to see if 14 was divisible by 7. Okay, 14, and so like you can do that forever. Or you can do this. You can just return this value. And you can get the right answer on the first try. This to me is much nicer. So when you are writing and I'm going to introduce another term here, an expression. This is an expression. Why is it an expression? It is something that evaluates to a value. 1 plus 1 is an expression. The string Wordle is an expression because they have values. I could, for example, store the result of this expression in a variable, or I can write it in a return statement. So I can simply return x%y equals 0. To me, this is much easier to debug because the most likely thing I do wrong the first time is I say return x%y, and that's clearly slightly wrong, right? So because that is slightly wrong, and like it would take a long time to figure out what's wrong with this code, right? Like, is it obvious to any of you what's going on here? Right, so this is terrible, but you know it's wrong. And so how do you know it's wrong? It's like, this is 0 in the case there's actually divisible, so I just need to compare that to 0, and perhaps you say 0 equals. It doesn't matter which way you go, right? So that can fix that. The other thing going on here that's a little bit suboptimal is comparing this to see if it's equal to true. I do see this from time to time. To me, this feels weird because you're checking to see if something is equal to true, and if it is, then it's true that it's equal to true. That shouldn't be there in the sense of it is just cluttering your code. Now, you are allowed to write that. It is not wrong to write that. But I think you're more likely to make mistakes if you do that, because if you write this too often, eventually you're going to write single equals sometime, and then your code will explode, right? And this is also true here, right? You can instead, for example, write not, and this is allowed as well, okay? So this is perhaps a simpler, perhaps more graceful. I don't know if you like this better, right? But I want to show you some ways to get your amount of text on your screen down. I think this is a little nicer with 25. Okay, so. Wait, is my indentation terrible? Look at this. Look how bad that is. Okay. So, as a rule, if you're returning true or false, you should probably be returning the result of some expression. That's my claim. This is also true if you're returning numbers. Okay. In general, when we write a function, we are having to make some, I call them design decisions. I'm choosing how I write my function, or for what purpose I write my function, about how versatile the function can be. Let me give you an example. On this assignment, or on this, problem, I wrote something called word row. Word row is used exactly twice. It is used to populate the third and fourth row. I could have just as easily written something called third row and fourth row. That is allowed, and that function would have had one fewer argument. And perhaps this would have been better to write because it was a little bit too easy to accidentally put 4 and 5 here. And then this looks weird. It is very easy to make a mistake that looks a lot like that when you're dealing with sort of row indexes in Python, right? And so perhaps it would have been better to, instead of writing row word, wrote, and I probably wouldn't have called them third and fourth row. I would have called them penultimate and ultimate row, because I don't want to think about the numbers, right? And so I'm all the time in this class saying initial or leading or not first, right? I say something other than first, and I try and avoid saying last as well, right? So I could have said last row, row word 0 minus 1. And I could have also written a function for this, right? I could have written reverse row word, right? So I made the design decision that I wanted to have a more versatile function, but the cost of having that more versatile function is every time I use this function, I have to think about what n is, right? You have to make that decision. And it's not that like I'm forcing you to make that decision. It's like someone has to decide, right? The decision has to be made at some point, right? And so an example of something you probably did is presumably your longest no repeat word code works on languages other than English. I don't know if that's true or not. That might be really interesting because maybe you want to make Wordle it would have to still use, the letters we use in English are the Latin characters, right?
Yes.
So I think Wordle works with any language that uses the Latin characters. Maybe it works with languages that don't use Latin characters. I don't know how. It should work with Cyrillic. I don't know if it'd work with Sanskrit. But once you write code that just assumes that there are Latin characters, which I think your code probably did, it can be more general. And so you don't, for example, know when you were looking for the longest no repeat word, whether you were working with English or any other dictionary. You could have, for example, been working with different types of English. So I think you could probably work with Old English, which has different words in it, right? And so I always encourage you to make the design decision of what is the minimum amount of information you need to know. The way I decided that I needed to know n and word in row word is I refer to n right here, and I refer to word right here. So I didn't ask for anything else. And another thing I could have asked for example, that I didn't need, is I could have asked for the most recent guess. Oftentimes it's helpful to pass around the most recent guess. In Wordle, it is oftentimes helpful to pass around what the answer is. You don't always need that information. Sometimes you do. I think on Wordle I wrote something called color word, and it needed to know the guess and the answer. But I think it maybe also needed to know the row, right? So as a rule, it is helpful to pass around the minimum amount of information. I really think of this in terms of avoiding clutter. The more variables whose names you have defined, the more likely you are to use something you don't mean to by accident, or to try and do something that is more complicated than it needs to be. So, more parameters make your function more general. More parameters make your function harder to use. So you're trading off the difficulty of writing functions versus the difficulty of using functions. You're always sort of trying to find this middle place where your functions are useful but not too hard. This is one of my all-time favorite names for a function. I teach Embiggen in every single one of my classes. I love Embiggenating. It's one of my favorite things to do. The only thing I like more than Embiggenating is Embiggenification, right? So we're going to Embiggenify something, okay? You're not having as much fun as me, and that's because it's impossible. I love Embiggenate. Okay, so functions are special in the sense that they don't have the same names inside of them as the names they have outside of them. So let's run this code, and before I run this code, think about what you think is going to be printed out by this code, okay? And I'm going to count to 10 in my mind while I'm asking you to think about that. So actually have some thoughts. I guess it doesn't have to be about this class. What is happening when we Embiggenify?
Nothing.
Oh, no, something's happening. It's just happening over there.
Is that
Right.
having problems because in the function x equals 2, but then in like that thing where you have print statements x equals 1?
My claim is there's no problem here. This is working exactly as intended. My claim is this is first name X, last name Embiggen, and this is first name X, no last name, or last name Main or something. And I can prove this to you through a variety of means. I think you may have asked about the order, Kaylee, so we can move this around. We can do the x first, unaltered. We can get rid of the x equals 2 and embiggen. We get an error, but we get to see the first x. This should give us a hint. Unbound local error. Cannot access local variable x where it is not assigned with a value. So this line of code right here in line 4 cannot see the value of this x. That's because when embiggen says x, it is referring to first name x, last name embiggen, and there is no such x. It would need to be defined on a previous line. This is first name x, last name nothing. And so when embiggen talks about x, it is only talking about x's in its family, which you should never have an x in your family because you shouldn't date people you meet at a family reunion. So that's a bad example. But you could still have the last name, right? Perhaps your last name is like your high school you attended or something, right? Because we all are going to marry someone we went to high school with. Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. It's probably too late for me. This is still going on, right? If I want to see what happens within embiggen, the way to get information out of embiggen is with a return statement. So I'm going to return x. I'm going to set x equal to its embiggening. And then this is maybe still not what I want to do, because to me it looks like what embiggening does is it adds 2 to x. So I also need to pass some information into x. And then we can embiggen x. We pass x into embiggen. It is embigganified. There's an embiggening factory. It goes in one side of the factory and comes out the other side much larger, right? But I should point out at this time that it doesn't matter what you call x. We can change all of this to y. And the code will work the same way, because when embiggen is referring to someone, literally the easiest way to think of this is when you walk into the embiggen factory, they ask you your preferred name, and they do not care what you are referred to in the outside world, right? So x shows up at the embiggen factory, says, hey, I'm going by y these days, no problem, passes through the function, and then is sent out the other end much larger, right? In this way, it is just like the commercial for an electrolyte mass gainer for an influencer who only appears in character, right? So this should make perfect sense to us. Do you all use mass gainers? All right. No, any multi-sport athletes? Okay. I was looking up ways to get huge earlier because I weighed myself on the scale this morning and that number was wrong. Okay. So I believe in your sections this week you're going to see a function probably called Vegas, and we call it Vegas because we want you to think of what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. So we can name our functions Vegas, and this makes perfect sense. So if I name this Vegas, and I name this, and we Vegas y, no, we have to Vegas x. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. We send our good friend x nothing to Vegas. That friend walks in and says, hello, my name is Y Vegas. Y Vegas is handed a scoop of mass gainer, which they mix into water in their shaker bottle and then chug it in a single fell swoop. It's that Gatorade bottle back there on that. That's actually a prop that I've had in here the entire term, right? So Y gets 3 times larger, right? Walks in at 150 pounds, leaves at 450, right? Unfortunately, falls into a black hole and is never seen again. And the person that walked in is still referred to. So perhaps their picture shows up in the paper. Missing, that's kind of morbid. I don't know. So anyways, you disappear inside Vegas, never to be seen ever again, right? As we all watch money do, right? So this happens to money. This doesn't happen. Okay, I take $100 to Vegas, I triple it, and then I don't get out of town with it, right? That makes sense. Okay. Any gamblers? Correct. No. You keep getting answers wrong to very easy questions. Okay. Let's run this code. Why is copy pasting so hard? I learned a new way to make slides that adds like little buttons that you can press to copy paste the code block, but I wasn't clever enough to get it working for this class over the summer, so I'm having to suffer for one more year. Okay, so what's happening here? X shows up and says, "What up? I'm 3." And that is old enough to go to Las Vegas, right? So we send X to Las Vegas, right? X walks into Vegas and meets a friend named Y. Now, in this case, X, no last name, just starts going by X Vegas, right? Can we tell this X is this X, right? And so X shows up to Vegas, and there's someone there named Y. And they're like cruising around. They're probably going to like Caesar's Forum to go to the Hard Rock Cafe. I don't know much about Vegas, right? But I think there's a Hard Rock Cafe in a mall called Caesar's Forum, right? Okay. Hey, Caesar reference, Latin reference, Latin. Ah, yeah, it's around. Okay. And so what does for I in range 3 mean? Well, that means they've got a friend who is growing and changing over time. And we all have friends in our lives who are experiencing personal growth, right? So we can understand this. So Y shows up, and then they have a friend named I. And so what happens? Well, they see their friend named I, and the first time they see their friend named I has a value of 0. So their friend has not gone through that much personal growth yet. And when that happens, X plus equals Y. So what happens? X ages by the same number of years that Y is old, right? So X goes from what it began as, which is 3, and it adds 2. And then they see their friend again, and their friend is 1 this time. We add 2 again, and so X is now 7. Ta-da! And then we go through the loop a third time. When I is equal to 2, we add 2 to X, and X becomes equal to 9. So when we're done at the end, we get out and we see that the initial X that went in the factory is still named 3, but the person that came out the other end is going by a new name. They're now going by Z nothing, and that Z nothing is equal to 9. If this doesn't make sense to you, make it make sense. You work through this yourself. But what is going to happen if I change this to 5? Will it be 13? Should I believe you? You hope. 13 is still too young for Vegas. You should hope for at least 19, right? Okay. What happens if I change this to 7 and 1? It just so happens that what I've done, I don't even know what's going on there. I'm just going to do a bunch of back. What this is actually calculating is f of x equals 7 plus 1x. Because we're going to add, nope, it's 1 times 7. Because we add x, and then we add 7 n times. So this is actually just a linear equation. But if you're not into linear equations, don't think of it that way. Just think of it as walking through Vegas. So if we do 3's everywhere, we'll get 12, because we start with 3, then we add 3 3 times. If we start with 0, we'll get 9, and so on. So this is one way to think of this information. If you don't like these extra spaces here, you can also get rid of those. And so maybe that looks a little nicer. Right. Oh, I should have done it with quotes. Hold on. There we go. So this is what's happening in Vegas, staying in Vegas. Okay. We'll go through a quick summary of a function call. When you call a function, the expression that you give in the arguments is evaluated before the function calls. Now, why did I introduce all this terminology, right? Because I referred to an expression. What is the expression? The The expression is the thing that is going to turn into a value that is provided as a parameter to a function. 3 plus 4 is an expression. The expression has the value 7. So this is the same thing as calling the function on 7. I'm going to add 9 to 7, and I'm going to get 16 back. So when I call an expression, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to figure out what that x is referring to. That x is referring to the value 4 plus 3. It is not too bad to, I don't know. You can always create a variable, store the expression in the variable, and then call the function on the variable. So it is perhaps easier to say x equals 4 plus 3, and then call this on x. The results are the same, but you can look at x in the intermediate. The next thing that happens is we take the name of the corresponding argument. Initially, we're just going to take the names in order, right? And in my case, I only have one name. So we're going to say, I'm going to refer to that x as x. But that is true even if I change this to some other name like var. Let's see. Wait, where is x undefined? Oh, this is supposed to be var. Okay, so what's going on here? I create some variable named var. I set it equal to 4 plus 7, or anything else. It doesn't matter what you set it equal to. No one cares, right? I'm going to say, hello, var nothing is going to walk into Vegas and say, I'm going by x. So we're going by x here, and we refer to that as x. Here's an example. The next thing we do is we do all of the instructions or statements or expressions or evaluations within the function body one at a time using the names that we're using in the function body. So because var walks into Vegas and says I'm going by x, when we refer to x within the function body, it is defined. We can break this. Simply not give it an argument. And that doesn't work. That's the same problem we had earlier with x. But we can say, at the beginning of this, for example, x equals 4 plus 3. And then the code will work the same way. So when I say, hey, I want there to be a variable named x, and I want it to be equal to 4 plus 3, I can create a variable outside of the function named 4 plus 3. I can pass that variable into the function as an argument, and it will take on the name x, and it will function the same way. So this is how we can do that, and you can see this with print n times as well. Then the last thing that happens, and always the last thing that happens in the function, is you get to a return statement. Now, the other thing that can happen is you just fall off the end of the function and there's nothing there, right? So if there's no return statement here, what happens? Our return value is none. If I place a return, if I return none here, the function is the same. But actually, from the perspective of mine, or main, or outside, and say outside, for example, it makes no difference whether these calculations in the function take place, so we can actually put return none back at the beginning. And so we get the same value back. We don't have to do all of the work inside of the function. Or we can. It's up to us. Oftentimes, if we're doing all of the work inside of the function, we actually do want to return some value we calculated. For example, we may want to return x. And so, whatever expression, and we can write something else here, whatever expression we write after return is the value that is placed inside z. So this thing becomes equal to x plus 3 times 3 plus 7. Is that close? No, it's var. And so we'll still get the 23 back because we're doing the same combination of expressions. What am I doing? Control Z many times. That's how functions work. Okay. I am supposed to teach you these vocabulary words. I think it's easier to understand things if I don't teach them to you, so I'm putting them on this slide. I like the use of the idea of last names. So Vegas is the last name, or perhaps the title, right? And we can actually think of the last names of words out here in the file as being, for example, the file name. So this is example var. There are other things that are defined, namely print was not defined anywhere, but we can still use it. Those are built-ins. So we have variables inside of functions. If we write one function inside another function, as you do with interaction on Wordle, or I think, is Wordle a function? Wordle's a function, right? So inside the Wordle function, graphics window is defined, which means you can see graphics window anywhere inside of Wordle, right? That is enclosing. Then there are global things, usually things that are imported or things that are built in, like print. And then the built-ins are the most general. This is called scope. I think your section leaders will refer to it as scope. The way to think of this is make sure when you want to refer to something inside of a function, you either get it as an argument or you know some other way to refer to it, right? We have to know how to refer to things just so we can talk about them. This is a final closing example. Let's see. I looked at the clock that's wrong. That's unhelpful. 3 minutes left. Here are two functions. This is my contains no duplicates code, and this is my no vowels code. And if I scroll down, instead of having longest no duplicates, I have longest which funks. This is named after Uptown Funk, because we're going to funk you up, right? Okay. So here is another way to write. Do I have English words? I bet I have English words. From English, import English words. Yes. Sorry, or what I meant was, yay.
No, that was first try.
Yes, yes. And in fact, I knew on the first try that what I meant was first try. So, okay, what is happening here? You all wrote this, right? And I wrote this, but this wouldn't be hard to write. This is just checking to see if a word contains vowels, right? We can check for the longest word which funks for different functions. So I can print longest which funks, no duplicates. Nope, that's fake. No duplicates. Sometimes you like autocomplete, sometimes you don't. I don't know, it's up to you, right? So I think that's not allowed. Okay, my code doesn't work for some reason. If len word candidate. Oh. This has to be length of candidate, right? Oh, there we go. Do we think ambidextrously is the longest with no duplicates? Is that what you all got? Okay. What do we think the longest word with no vowels is? Tell me why. I don't know if it's why, but that's the one I think of. Okay. So let's check for no vowels. Vowels. Oh, it's supposed to be two vowels. So, it's glycals, of course, right? Because I am a Y as a consonant truther. When I pronounced glycals, I definitely pronounced both of those Y's as a vowel, right? So let's go ahead and throw a Y in there real quick. And now it's.
How is that a word?
That's a great question. Have you seen some of the words in English words?
There have been, when I've been doing like my Wordle and I've been running it, like I have it so it prints
Yeah.
out a word when I do it, and it's giving me words, and I'm like, how is that a word?
Yeah,
Somehow it's in English words, and it's so confusing. And then I actually looked, like when I was working with one of them.
I remember one of them is odd.
We actually looked
Yeah.
at English words, and we were like, there was some weird stuff in there.
There's some bangers in Wordle.
Oh, yeah.
You can do whatever you want with your life, and I'm going to send you home after this, or wherever you go. So I also wrote Wordle, and when I wrote Wordle, I used two different word lists. I asked an LLM for 500 common 5-letter words, so these are the possible solutions. By the way, I think all of those are words. Do you see anything up there that doesn't look like a word to you? Right? And then I was like, okay, but
people are allowed to guess like things that are absolutely not words, like ly. That's not a word. That's the least word I've ever seen. That is the opposite of a word. Let's look at another one. Naifs. Completely not a word. Naffs. Also not a. They're probably not the same word. So anyway, you're welcome to use these word lists, right? This is JavaScript, but you can literally copy paste this into Python. I think you might have to take const off, and that's all. So if you want to use these for your Wordle, you will have a much better time. Good luck on Wordle. I have absolute confidence in you. If nothing else, get the letters colored. If you don't get the letters colored completely perfectly, that's okay. Here's a secret I'm not allowed to tell you. If you make sure the answer doesn't contain duplicated words, your code is much easier. You didn't hear that from me. Okay, have a great day. You don't have to implement like half the logic if you just check the answer.
I just kind of bashed my head against the wall until it worked.
See, the thing is, all you have to do is write down what happened.
And then it happened.
The problem for me was I didn't know how Wordle worked, so I wrote down what I thought it did, and that was wrong.
Yeah.
So I had no idea that like duplicate letters were treated differently because I've never guessed a word with 2 letters.
But what if the actual word has 2 letters?
So the first time that happened to me, I just didn't win that day because I didn't know the words could contain duplicate letters.
That's really
Yeah, right. So that was like my first miss. And then I saw a Twitter post once about a triple word letter. And I was like, there's 5-letter words with a triple in them, which I didn't know. Right?
I mean, sassy is
I also had to
using that.
Yeah, I had no
Not
idea.
a lot of that.
But like, even if you showed me sassy and was like, how many S's do you think are in there? I'd be like, probably 2. That's what I was. Well, I'm looking at.
Okay. Good progress. Is it, I'm assuming it's still recording.
Probably.
What up, YouTube?
What up,
Please-
YouTube?
Please actually look at the freaking prompt.